You are Locked On Hawks POSTCAST, part of Locked On Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into our Atlanta Hawks basketball postcast. I am your host, Tenitra Batiste, and of course, joining alongside me tonight is Deshaun Tate. We welcome you in for the best Hawks talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. They are sponsored tonight. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And of course, the Locked On Hawks postcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, Deshaun, the Hawks were back home looking to even up this season series versus the Bulls tonight, but they kind of went dry from distance in the second quarter, never really bounced back. And of course, we'll talk about what happened in the and one. Then we'll look a little bit ahead to Wednesday's game at the Hornets. Of course, that's the final game before the All-Star break. But first, got to get our takes on tonight's 136-126 loss to the Bulls. And Tate, you said this was a classic example of the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah, no doubt. Just when you think that you've got the tortoise all figured out and I'm much faster and I'm much, more athletic and I can get up and down. Great job in terms of fast break points on tonight. Got a chance to see those numbers look a lot better. 21-7 edge, but it felt like that may have been probably the only edge because we didn't get a chance to see the front court, which we knew was, going to be a little bit more shallow on tonight going up against, Nikola Vucevic, obviously Andre Drummond, who killed them the last game, the day after Christmas for like 25 rebounds or whatever. But it just felt like Chicago was just never out of the game. The game was never out of reach for them. And they were just as consistent as can be. They never got away from doing what they had been doing since the first quarter. And this was also a game that, I'm not going to say playoff implications per se, but if the playoffs were today, we're talking about two seeds that are right there at the bottom as well. It was interesting, but I think that this is one of the games that the Hawks can take notes from, because, we always talk about how the styles make fights and different things like that. I think this is a team that Atlanta hadn't seen, anyone with this type of style where it is slow and it's methodical. It reminds me of the playoffs where, all the transition points, there isn't that as much anymore. The game slows down possession by possession, more half-court offenses and letting DeMar DeRozan go off, mid-range king. That was the other interesting part I was going to say. The two ties in this game being, DeJounte Murray, as good as he is from mid-range, and obviously the mid-range king and DeMar DeRozan, and then even the two guys that are up for Sixth Man of the Year between Bogey Bogdanovic and Kobe White, North Carolina. There you go, Tenitra. So, I mean, listen, I thought that it was a good lesson learned on tonight. When one team gets punched in the mouth at home or what have you, and no matter what that record looks like, I think the Hawks learned a valuable lesson that they can learn from.
Yeah, and I would agree with you in that it was one of those games where, first off, it was the depth in the front court as well. So, and we'll talk about the backcourt blues we saw tonight, but I think the depth in the front court with no 15 kind of was more evident maybe than it has been in the last couple of games. Because Onyeka Okongwu's definitely had a solid game. And granted, he did hurt his toe. So when you look at his final stat line and you see 11 points and 12 rebounds, it doesn't quite tell the whole story, but it does tell you that maybe you saw something missing there because Bruno Fernando kind of gave you flashes the last couple of games, but you kind of knew that wasn't going to be sustainable. And you saw that tonight.
So
with 4 points and 7 rebounds. That's not sustainable. And I think that was a big problem because, like we said, the backcourt absolutely torched this Hawks backcourt, this Bulls backcourt did. But really, when you kind of look in the numbers as well and you say, well, where was the big that was going to stop Nikola Vucevic? Where was the big that was going to stop Andre Drummond? Or where was the big that was really going to stop that front court? When you look at DeMar DeRozan and the kind of night he had, 29 points tied with Dosunmu for the game high, and you start wondering, okay, Where was Saddiq Bey, Jalen John? Like, where was that, at the 3-4 to give him some type of grief and kind of keep him respectable? And I don't know that element was really there. It seemed like the Hawks were, especially as that game plotted on, like you said, seemed like they were more consumed with catching up by scoring, which we understand. That's their natural inclination. It's to score. But it just felt like the Hawks were way too committed to, we're going to wait until our shots start to fall, and that's going to bring us back into the game, as opposed to, no, they're over here being real methodical and being really efficient with their shots. And they're going to go deep into the shot clock such that we won't even have as much time on the clock to be able to take our shots. So you look at that and you're kind of seeing, like you said, points in the paint are respectable, but more fast break points, were the most respectable. But then I look and kind of drill down into the numbers, and it's like, well, you kind of let them have their way in some areas where better, because your shots weren't exactly falling, maybe from the field, but from 3-point land where you would have
definitely wasn't.
Where, and that's where you would have expected to get back in the game. Once things started to kind of taper off, especially in that second quarter. And again, we'll kind of come back to that shortly, but especially when things started to taper off in that fourth quarter and you allowed this team to really, really start ratcheting it up, then what did you do to counter that on defense? It just seemed like DeMar DeRozan was getting the spacing that he wanted. He was able to get the shots that he wanted. He was really controlling. That's where the control and the tempo of the game really started.
Absolutely, it was.
Yeah, and there was really no answer that the Hawks, I don't even want to say that they didn't have for him, but it just didn't seem like anyone was there for it. Didn't seem like anyone was really saying, okay, I'm raising my hand. Second half, you might have had your way the first half, but you're not going to have your way scoring on us, and we're not going to allow you to put others in scoring position to do the same.
Well, I feel like a big part of this game, if I'm just being honest, was so defensive minded. Not only did Chicago do a good job offensively, particularly from the field and what have you, but also playing defense. I thought they had played very elite defense, and especially to be a team that you don't have Alex Caruso, their starting point guard. I don't think that I was thinking, like, how much are they going to miss that? But when you start talking about some of the other guys on the team, Ayo Dosunmu and some others, you kind of factor in, like, that is their culture to a degree. And then you start looking at the Hawks' inability to defend on top of that. I mean, this was a Chicago team that, if not tonight, then any other night, they look like the most disciplined team in the league. Elite ball movement. It was just a bad matchup. They were relentless. They were fearless. And they just weren't looking at their weaknesses or weren't looking at their errors as errors. They just kind of capitalized where they, felt the need to.
Yes. And that was one of the things I saw with them as well. They seemed very, very confident anytime they had a possession that did not result in points. They seemed to just get back on defense and get ready for their next possession. Whereas the Hawks seemed like they were kind of rushing through sometimes, or just kind of expecting a possession to go a certain way. And then, just really didn't kind of have an answer for why it didn't go that way. And that's interesting because in years past, with virtually the same rosters, these two teams usually go back and forth, up and down. They usually split a season series. So this is kind of interesting to me. And we'll talk about it a little bit more in the and one. But to me, it was very interesting that now you find Chicago to have a 2-0 lead in the season series, which also puts them 2 games ahead in the race for, I guess, that play-in space within the Eastern Conference. So it'll be interesting to see, because I feel like now the Hawks kind of put themselves with their backs against the wall. When we're looking at the bigger picture, I think they really missed an opportunity here. But we'll talk more about this Hawks-Bulls game and what went wrong tonight in the and one when we get back. And this episode of our Locked on Hawks postcast is brought to you by LinkedIn. Now, if you guys know anything about the job search, which, hey, I'm sure you do, because a lot of us have been in it at some shape, in some way, shape, or form at some point in time. And I'm talking about an extensive job search, right? Imagine being on the other side of that and being the company trying to find the right candidate. Well, when you're hiring for a small business, that's exactly what you want to do. and you want to utilize your resources, time, talents, treasures properly to find the right candidate. And LinkedIn Jobs can help you to do it. They have the tools to help find the right professionals for your team, both faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn also does all that while making the process easy and intuitive, so much so that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So LinkedIn is constantly looking for ways to make the process easier for you, and 2.5 small businesses are using LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for absolutely free. Terms and conditions do apply, but this is a great opportunity, again, for you to find some of the best candidates and even launch a feature that helps you write your job descriptions to make the process even easier and quicker to find top talent. So, Deshaun, this was one of those interesting games where in the first quarter and even early into the second quarter, this looked like, okay, easy breezy. The Hawks are going to get their 7th win in the last 9 games. We're going to start talking about the fact that State Farm Arena is looking like it gives home court advantage again. Hawks went on a 10-0 run. They went up 8 at the end of the first quarter. They even went into the second quarter with 11 assists, no turnovers. So that means you are moving the ball well, and you are also protecting it well. Except that then the Hawks allowed the Bulls to go on a 17-4 run the last 5 minutes of the second quarter, and it really seems like they never recovered from that. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, like I said, the inability to play defense. This is a Chicago team that,
Well, wait. Can I ask you a question, though?
Absolutely.
Was that inability or was that lack of desire?
Probably a combination of both.
Okay.
Keep going. So bad that it looked like an inability. Like they just were not capable of doing so. And this isn't a Chicago team that's known for its offense. We talked about how good they look defensively. This is a Chicago team that, exactly, ranks one of the worst in the NBA. And I don't think that it helped the fact that, when you start talking about the ability for Chicago to score, they had 4 players tonight that had 20 points or more.
Yes.
That's almost like unheard of. Now, I know that the Hawks defense is bad and ranks amongst one of the lowest in the NBA, but like something has to be corrected with that somehow, because you can't expect high hopes. It'll be nothing but just, wishful thinking that this team can really excel, and to a height of which is desirable for most Hawks fans with playing defense the way that they did on tonight. And that's a way that they've kind of been playing defense. Yeah, there's going to be some moments, there's going to be some spurts where they're going to play defense really good, and in some games. But for the most part, it's like they haven't been able to stop a nosebleed. And that's something that just really can't be tolerated no matter how many points you put on the board. And obviously most people say, oh, well, you win the game because you get more points than the other team. Yeah, but you got to be able to stop that other team. We talked before, many weeks ago about, Indiana put up 151 game, then 150 another game, and then over 100 and something another game. It's just way too many instances of they're not, being defense. We thought that they were going to be outmatched, in the front court, in which it appeared that they definitely were, talking about the Atlanta Hawks. Somehow they out-rebounded the Chicago Bulls. Not really sure how that happened, but probably because they had so many guys like Ayo Dosunmu and a few others who just could not miss a shot. That's probably how that ended up happening.
Indeed. And I think it was one of those things where, again, when you look into that particular stat for rebounds, offensive rebounds, 15-7, that's really where you won that, because your shots weren't falling, especially from the 3-point line. So obviously you're going to get more second chance opportunities. Thus you beat them on the boards by 6. But if we're being honest about it, they really beat you on the boards. I don't care what that number shows, because ultimately speaking, they were doing those rebounds where they counted. And I could count at least 3 of those rebounds in the last 2 to 3 minutes where you were just heaving up shots desperately, or the Bulls were falling off a little bit, but it was too little too late to give that type of intensity at that point in the game. And that's why I wanted to clarify the question of, was it that you can't play or you don't play? Because you certainly caused 2 turnovers in those last couple of minutes that actually got you to within 6, which,
Mhm.
I mean, that's nothing for a team to, bogey to spot up and hit a 3, trade to spot up and hit a 3, and all of a sudden this game is going to overtime or you win it by 1. So to me, it was more of like, did you just not have interest? I mean, did you just assume that eventually the three ball that went completely quiet in the second quarter will come back in the second half? That's how I kind of felt like they played the game. Like they were leaning on or depending on the 3 ball to come back to them, or to come back to everybody other than Bogdan Bogdanovic. And it just really never did. But when you look at another area now I think for me, it was a bit shocking. This is the first time I can think of in recent memory where I felt like the opponent's backcourt really, really ran through the Hawks backcourt. I mean, it was confusing for me because, like you said, Cody White basically in relief. Dosunmu kind of expected that. He usually has a solid game against them, but we're talking about a combined 49 points, 14 assists, and 6 rebounds for White and Dosunmu. And then you look at the stat line for Trey and DeJounte, and it's 36 points.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the assists were good, 23 assists and 8 rebounds. But for me, again, that was kind of troubling because I was like, okay, why do they have that much trouble stopping Dosunmu and White? And did we see, Deshaun, any reverting back to some of those old habits of lack of communication and not playing togetherness that started in the backcourt that kind of then lent itself to the front court?
I don't think so. I
Okay,
don't think
good.
we saw. I don't think we saw. Yeah, I don't think we saw some of that. I think that. I think it was just things that that Chicago was doing that the Hawks hadn't seen before, B hadn't seen in a long time, or whatever the case may be.
Maybe a long time,
yeah, and I think that it's more so of that for me. And I mean, when you start factoring in, by far not an excuse, but obviously not having Clint and Bruno being limited, and I understand that as much as that can go, on a positive spin for you during the games that you win, is the same thing that happens when you obviously lose a basketball game, but you just didn't have one of those phenomenal nights by anybody. I mean, for what you got from Deandre Hunter, considering his time and things like that. That's one thing. Bogdanovic, obviously. I think the bench points helped out a whole lot more.
That kept you in the game.
That's what ultimately kept you in the game. So without that, it's crazy to think that, this team would have even really had a chance against a Bulls team that's really not all that good. But I'll tell you what, they're definitely well coached, and they're just super disciplined. This was a Hawks team that just really didn't appear all that disciplined tonight for me, for some reason.
I would agree. And speaking of the contributions that you got from the bench, of course, Deandre Hunter has been coming off the bench due to right knee injury management. So the Hawks are saying that he's not necessarily on a minutes restriction. I think it's more of a minutes monitoring so that they don't have a cutoff number for him. But tonight he did play 28 minutes, got 23 points in those 28 minutes, 6 of 14 from the field, 4 of 7 from 3, along with 6 rebounds. And I'll just be honest, it really made me think about whether or not he might actually be a better weapon for the Hawks off the bench versus the starting role.
I've been saying it, Tanitra. I've been kind of beating that drum for a while now. And again, a lot of that kind of goes back to something that I said, many episodes ago, where I don't think that Deandre Hunter had ever been in a challenging position to where he may lose his spot. Regardless of the end result tonight, there's an old saying that goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This doesn't seem broken to me. It makes perfect sense. You start this guy and you sit that guy. And the guy that needs to be starting is number 41, Saddiq Bey. Because I know what I'm getting every single night.
Yes.
When he's healthy or when he's not, whatever the case may be, I know what to expect. And not that my expectations are ridiculously high, but sometimes you just need a little bit more of that spark off of the bench, in which I think that's something that Deandre Hunter gives this team.
Yeah, and I think Saddiq has shown a consistency and a commitment to two-way play. Yeah, tonight it was only 11 points and 5 rebounds, which was a little bit of a logo for him from what we've seen the last couple of games, but ultimately speaking, I was still pleased with it because at least, like you said, I know I'm going to get quality results from him each and every night at both ends of the court. Or if he sees that his shot's not falling, he's not going to sit there and kind of try to force it. He's going to go wherever the need is and wherever he thinks that he can actually contribute. And that's how he makes a difference. So I really kind of find myself liking him in that starting role. I think the bigger question for Quinn Snyder may be, and I was talking to somebody about this earlier today, and it's sort of like, I call it the Zen effect, sort of like Phil Jackson had with certain players, knowing how to push certain buttons when they were in positions. Yeah, when they were in positions that maybe were uncomfortable for them, but he could get them to perform and deliver.
That's right.
I think Quinn has that Zen-like quality.
I can see that. I can see that.
Where he could kind of help Deandre Hunter to understand that here's why we switched Saddiq into the starting role, and here's why you're coming off the bench. You're still going to play deep minutes, but here's what I'm seeing. Now, the question becomes whether or not Deandre Hunter would be able to transition or kind of reset his mind, because I think Bogdan Bogdanovic is an amazing example of a former starter who was then moved to the bench and now has become the heart and soul of the second unit, the leader of the second unit, and all maybe arguably the top sixth man in the entirety of the NBA. We'll see, because you're right. You did bring it up recently for the last couple of games.
There's that confidence aspect there too, a little bit for DeAndre
Well, that's the
Hunter.
mentality. Yeah, that's why I said I don't know if he has the mental the way Bogey did, because Bogey's like, I don't care where I come from.
That's right.
I'm going to shoot this ball.
That's right.
And if you want me to come from the bench and shoot this ball, most of the time I'm doing it. If you want to insert me or have to insert me into the starting role, I'll do that too. But I'm confident enough, and I won't overthink it and wonder if that's an indictment on me. I'll look at it as that's just where the team is. That's where we have to be.
And it shows in the game. That's true.
It shows exactly. Speaking of where the team has to be, the Hawks have to be up 85 North on Wednesday, hopefully doing something to end on a high note before the All-Star break. We'll talk about it when we get back. Our Locked On Hawks postcast is also brought to you by Nissan. Now, are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is absolutely perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. So, done with the days of Google Assistant, Google Maps, Google Play Store. It's all built right in to the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system, almost like the very tablet I'm looking at right now. The 2024 Rogue is perfect. It's a mid-size crossover for your next adventure. But don't forget about the other two in the mix of SUVs for Nissan. The Nissan Pathfinder, which has room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability, or the Armada, which also can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style, and it tows bigger and can explore further in the 2024 Armada. That's what you can do. So take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and find your next experience. And you can check them out by shopping NissanUSA.com. So, Deshaun, we want to and hope that this team can end on a high note going into the All-Star break. And they have an opportunity to do that up in Charlotte on Wednesday. They'll take on the Hornets. Let me ask you this. First of all, normally we would just go through keys of the game, right? But I want to say, because we really thought this was going to be a win for the Hawks, maybe kind of dialing it back and asking you this. Did you see at least somewhere, whether it was obviously not the team collectively, so there's that, but did you see anything individually that you liked tonight where it encourages you for what things can look like when they come back from the break?
Outside of the bench play, that what they got, in terms of contribution from DeAndre Hunter, who has clearly been looking really good coming off of the Pine, and obviously, Bogdanovic. Some of the others, maybe not as much, if I'm just being honest. And I hope that not only do I hope that I'm wrong about that, but they owe some get back for whatever reason. I think last year we were talking about them playing playing Charlotte. They lost 3 out of the 4 meetings to Charlotte. This year, I think they played them early at the beginning of the season, lost to them in that particular game as well. So I don't know what the issue is. We just sat up here talking about against the Bulls, the Styles making fights and everything else. They got to have an answer for Miles Bridges. That doesn't mean you're going to walk in there and they're going to lay down for you just because they're 7-21 record at home. They're also on a 2-game win streak.
They won the last 2, exactly.
Yeah, and you don't hear that very often about the Charlotte Hornets. So I think that I think that as long as the Hawks treat this situation not like it's just another game, and not reading the name on the front of the jerseys being the Charlotte Hornets, I think that they'll come away and be victorious. But it's going to take a little bit more than just assuming so and talking and saying it. That's going to be able to get them the win.
Right, and conference wins matter at this point. It doesn't matter who you get the win against or what their record is. The most important thing is you have to get the conference win. And, this was one of those games where Jalen Johnson was actually coming off the bench. He was the second highest scorer for the Hawks. So I think that bodes well now that he's been inserted into the starting lineup and had a nice near double-double game when they lost to the Hornets. So I think that's one, critical key there that could make the difference. I think, too, they didn't get the greatest game from the bench. Like the unit, just other than Jalen Johnson, nobody else from the unit showed up. So I think if you could do your part, bench unit, and you could actually show up, I think that's a good look. And that should at least put them in position to get a win. And I think also having Jalen Johnson inserted into the starting lineup should help. We hope that Onyeka won't have any problems because the word is that Clint won't come back until after the All-Star break. So we definitely need everything to be okay with Onyeka Okongwu, because we don't want to have this conversation that we're having tonight. We don't want to have this again Wednesday night. And I think to that point, with Jalen Johnson coming back, he's going to have his hands full. He's going to have his hands full potentially with helping out somehow, some way in making sure that the front court for the Hawks shows up a bit better. But honestly, I think it also boils down to this. We know that at the end of the day, the Hawks backcourt, we'll just call it an off day, because we did agree that we didn't.
And it felt like that.
We didn't see anything that shows we didn't see anything that shows that they were reverting back to how they played 10 games ago. I think we still saw shades of that, and I think they'll do a reset and they'll be just fine on Wednesday. Indeed. So we appreciate you guys for stopping by the Locked On Hawks Postcast as always. And remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more on the Hawks. Of course, check out our guy Brad Rowland on Locked On Hawks, and we will see you guys postcast Wednesday night.